Can we talk about the Justice League movie that almost was? Now, I'm not talking about a sequel to Snyder's film. I'm talking about the 2007 George Miller, yes, the guy who created Mad Max, star-studded Justice League movie. Jason Emmett here with the Movie Mix, and today I want to take you back to those days before the MCU was really a thing, back when Snyder hadn't created his vision of the Justice League. So this movie was tentatively titled Justice League Mortal, and they were kind of explaining it as a live-action interpretation of the animated series Justice League Unlimited, which I thoroughly enjoyed, just saying. So in my intro, I mentioned a star-studded cast, and trust me, it was. Armie Hammer was cast to play Bruce Wayne / Batman. DJ Cotrona from G.I. Joe Retaliation was set to star as Clark Kent, a.k.a. Superman. We had Australian model and actress Megan Gale as Wonder Woman. Adam Brody was set to play Barry Allen, the Flash. Santiago Cabrera was set to play Aquaman. And rapper Common was going to play the Green Lantern. Then we had what I consider the only really off casting in the movie, and that was Jay Baruchel as Maxwell Lord. He was going to be the bad guy of this. Now, everything in this movie looked to be in place. The cast, they were already training for the roles. The whole thing looked to be a go. It was scheduled to start filming in 2008. So this movie came about after two other DC films fell through. That was David Goyer's Flash movie and Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman. Both of those had been worked on, especially Wonder Woman, for quite some time. I know Adrienne Palicki at one time was rumored to be Wonder Woman, and I know she tried out for this film as well. After those two films didn't happen, Warner Brothers reached out to husband and wife team Michelle and Kieran Mulroney. They wanted them to pen a script for this Justice League film, which they did, and by all accounts, it was a good script. The project was greenlit, and everything looked promising. Warner Brothers had decided not to use their existing DC cast at this point. What that meant was no Brandon Routh, who had just played Superman, and no Christian Bale, who had just, filmed the Dark Knight film. They wanted this movie to be a completely fresh start, which DC seems to have a history of trying to do. Please, James Gunn, get it right this time. Now, they first offered the director's seat to Jason Reitman, who at the time turned it down because, he stated he was kind of working on smaller films and didn't want to try anything this big budget just yet. So it went to George Miller, who again directed all of the existing Mad Max films. From beginning to the most current one, we've had George Miller. There were a couple of other names attached to the cast. Teresa Palmer was set to play Talia al Ghul, for example, and actor Hugh Keys-Byrne was set to play Martian Manhunter. We actually have some shots of him in makeup, and it looks kind of cool. This film had an estimated budget of around $220 million, and Weta was on board to help with at least the costuming, which some of these images aren't great. They're blurry because they are just what we have, but you can kind of see some of the concepts and some of the costuming, and it looked really cool. In fact, some of these might be some of the favorites I've ever seen. I really like Superman's here, and from what little we can see of the Flash, it looks great too. We also had, this was the Wonder Woman costume that they were planning on using, and you see kind of a hybrid thing going on here from what we had from, Linda Carter days to what we ended up getting, and I like it a lot too. So what happened? Well, first, the writer's strike hit. That was the first issue that befell this film. The strike caused a delay in filming. After that, there was a location issue. See, the film was going to be filmed completely in Australia, for the most part in Australia, but the Australian government, they refused to give a 40% tax break, which they had said they would give, and they did that because they claimed that the movie hadn't hired enough Australian actors. And just to be clear, there were some Australian actors in this movie, but the Australian government decided last minute that it just wasn't enough, so they weren't going to give the tax break. So that caused the entire production to have to pull up stakes, and they moved everything to Vancouver, Canada, pushing production once again. Meanwhile, while all of this is happening, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight hits theaters, and it's this massive success. And that prompts WB to let Nolan move forward with the rest of his trilogy, and then it sort of shifted WB's mindsets. They started thinking, well, maybe solo films is the way to go. Maybe we don't try this big ensemble thing. it strikes me as hilarious because at the time, they didn't want to have multiple versions of their characters in their universe. That's funny to me because, well, DC has ended up doing that a ton, especially if you take in consideration the Arrowverse shows versus the movies, and now we have the Batman, and they're going to do animated stuff, so it ended up happening anyway. The loss of that tax credit also caused some budget problems and some budget issues, and the multiple delays on filming caused the actors' contracts to lapse. So it would have been a whole thing again to go back in and get those contracts redone again. Also, like I said, there was some budget issues at this point. They were losing a big chunk of the finance because of that 40% tax credit. So I said they were planning solo movies, which after Nolan's Batman, which was kind of considered the first, the next up was Green Lantern, which I'm sure we all remember that film. The Man of Steel reboot was in there after that. Eventually we got Wonder Woman, and then eventually we got The Flash, etc., etc. Now, personally, I've never read the script for this movie, although it was supposedly leaked online back in 2013. Now, rumors have it that it's actually really good. So let me tell you a little bit about the storyline because we know a lot about it. The story was said to be loosely based around the Tower of Babel storyline with a smidge of Crisis of Infinite Earths in there as well. It would have had Batman build a machine called Brother's Eye that he used to keep an eye on the supes around the world. Now, that machine gets stolen by Maxwell Lord, who builds these enhanced robots to kind of fight the Justice League. He, at some point, brainwashes Superman, turning him against his own team. There was supposedly this massive knockdown, drag-out fight between Superman and Wonder Woman. I've heard stuff like broken bones and just all kinds of stuff. And in the end, Flash sacrifices himself to save the entire world. What might have been? See, to me, this sounds so much better than the Justice League film we got. And yes, it might have been a little premature making a Justice League movie without introducing the cast. I agree. But remember, this was before Iron Man was released, and it was before any Avenger movie. I think Superman himself explains it best. DJ Cotrona was quoted as saying, "The best way I can describe it is George Miller's mind is so operatic and big and expansive. It's a shame that the world didn't get to see what he would have done with superheroes. It was allegorical, like a story of Greek gods almost. He was doing things with Superman's character and Batman's character and all the iconic favorites that's never been done before. Just watch Mad Max Fury Road, and you can only imagine what he would do with those iconic characters." So here's the thing. We now have a new DC universe in the works, and right now solo films are happening. And I'm just saying, Mr. Gunn, this script exists out there. And George Miller, well, yeah, he's almost 80, but he's still kicking out there. So maybe some version of this could still happen one day. I would even accept an animated version if I would love to see what this story was. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us here. Please leave your comments below. Give me your thoughts on this film that almost happened. Let me know would you have preferred this? Did you want to see this? What do you think of the cast overall? Also, punch that like button, kick that share button, and smash that subscribe button. I might just go back and go through and watch Justice League Unlimited again. You guys stay awesome.